Global trade is not slowing down. It is breaking apart in real time, and most people are still looking at the wrong signals. Headlines talk about shipping delays, tariffs, or inflation as if these are temporary disruptions. But what is actually happening is structural collapse. The system that governed how goods, energy, food, and capital moved across the world for the last 70 years is being dismantled piece by piece. This system was built after World War II on a simple promise. Nations would specialize, trade freely, and depend on one another so deeply that war would become irrational. Cheap labor in Asia, energy from the Middle East, manufacturing hubs in China, financial centers in the West, and shipping routes protected by the U.S. Navy created the most efficient economic machine in history. That machine is now turning against itself. The first cracks appeared quietly, long before pandemics or wars. Supply chains, optimized for speed, removed redundancy, resilience, and national control. Corporations chased margins, governments outsourced strategic industries, and entire countries became dependent on foreign inputs for food, medicine, energy, and technology. When shocks arrived, the system did not bend, it snapped. COVID did not cause the collapse, it exposed it. Factories shut down, ports froze, shelves emptied, and governments realized they no longer controlled the basic lifelines of their own societies. Instead of repairing the system, states began weaponizing it. Trade became leverage. Supply chains became pressure points. Interdependence turned into vulnerability. What followed was not cooperation, but fragmentation. The United States began reshoring critical industries, restricting technology exports, and sanctioning entire economies. China responded by stockpiling resources, subsidizing domestic production, and building parallel trade networks. Europe found itself trapped in between, dependent on foreign energy, foreign security, and foreign manufacturing, while pretending neutrality was still possible. Russia's invasion of Ukraine shattered the illusion that economic integration prevents war. Energy flows that powered Europe for decades were cut overnight. Sanctions froze reserves once considered untouchable. The message was clear to every government watching. Your assets are only safe until they are politically inconvenient. From that moment forward, global trust began to die. Countries started asking the same question at the same time. What happens if we are next? Food exporting nations restricted shipments to protect domestic supply. Energy producers began demanding payment in friendly currencies. Shipping insurance costs exploded in contested regions. Strategic choke points like the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, and the Taiwan Strait became geopolitical flashpoints. Trade routes that once symbolized efficiency now represent risk. Every container, every tanker, every data cable is a potential hostage. Behind the scenes, the architecture of globalization is being quietly replaced. Instead of one integrated system, the world is splintering into blocks, one system centered on the United States and its allies, another anchored by China and resource-rich partners, and a growing group of countries forced to choose sides whether they want to or not. This is not deglobalization. It is hostile reorganization. Nations are not trading less. They are trading differently, prioritizing political alignment over price. Efficiency is being sacrificed for security. Cost is being replaced by control. This shift is invisible to consumers at first, but devastating over time. Prices rise permanently, not temporarily. Supply becomes less predictable. Innovation slows as markets fragment. Smaller countries lose leverage, caught between giants that now view trade as a battlefield. The rules that once governed disputes through institutions are ignored. Power decides outcomes. Trade is no longer about mutual benefit. It is about strategic denial. Who gets access? Who gets cut off? Who starves first when things go wrong? This is why global trade feels unstable, because it is no longer neutral. Every shipment now carries political risk. Every dependency is a liability. Every agreement is provisional. Governments are planning for scarcity, not abundance. Militaries are planning to secure supply lines, not just borders. Corporations are redesigning operations around worst-case scenarios instead of growth forecasts. And ordinary people feel it as constant pressure. Higher costs, fewer choices, fragile jobs, and the sense that something foundational is slipping away. The collapse is not a single event. It is a process, slow enough to ignore, fast enough to be irreversible. What comes next is not a sudden crash, but a world defined by permanent instability, where trade, security, and conflict merge into the same system. As global trade fractures, power shifts away from markets and toward states willing to use force, coercion, and control. Countries that once relied on exports to grow will struggle as access narrows. Import-dependent nations will face constant pressure, forced to comply politically or pay economically. Resource-rich states gain leverage, not because they are strong, but because everyone else is exposed. This is how competition hardens into confrontation. When energy, food, semiconductors, and shipping lanes become matters of national survival, compromise becomes weakness. Diplomatic disputes no longer stay diplomatic. They spill into tariffs, sanctions, cyber attacks, blockades, and proxy conflicts. War does not begin with bombs anymore. It begins with restrictions, denials, and quiet escalations that make conflict inevitable long before the first missile is launched. We are already watching this transition. The United States is restructuring trade around strategic allies, accepting higher costs in exchange for control. China is building redundancy through overcapacity, stockpiles, and influence across the global south. Europe is rearming while trying to rebuild industrial independence it abandoned decades ago. Shipping lanes are being militarized. Insurance markets are pricing in conflict. Digital trade is fragmenting as data sovereignty replaces open networks. Even currencies are becoming weapons, with countries reducing exposure to systems that can be frozen or seized. None of this is reversible without trust, and trust is gone. Once states assume trade can be used against them, they act preemptively. They hoard, they restrict, they secure. And those actions trigger reactions. Elsewhere, the system feeds on itself. For smaller nations, this new world is brutal. Neutrality no longer guarantees safety. Economic alignment signals political allegiance, whether intended or not. Accepting infrastructure funding, energy contracts, or technology platforms now places countries inside rival spheres of influence. Refusing comes with penalties. Accepting comes with obligations. The space to maneuver shrinks. This is how global systems collapse without a single moment of failure. Not with panic, but with normalization. Each restriction becomes policy. Each sanction becomes precedent. Each retaliation becomes justification for the next. Over time, trade flows resemble supply lines in a conflict rather than commercial exchanges. Governments plan accordingly. Militaries adapt. Alliances harden. And once those structures are in place, war becomes a matter of timing, not choice. The most dangerous part is perception. Leaders begin to believe that delay increases vulnerability. If supply chains are fragile, securing them early makes sense. If rivals are preparing for conflict, restraint looks naive. If the system is breaking anyway, taking decisive action feels rational. This is how history repeats, not through ideology, but through incentives. The collapse of global trade removes the buffers that once absorbed shocks. Every crisis now hits directly. Every disruption cascades globally. Every regional conflict carries worldwide consequences. The world is moving from abundance to allocation, from cooperation to control, from efficiency to endurance. That transition is inherently violent, even if the violence is delayed. What comes next is a world where economic events trigger military responses, where blockades replace negotiations, and where trade routes are defended like borders. It is a world where prosperity depends less on innovation and more on alignment, where survival matters more than growth, where the cost of miscalculation is catastrophic because there are no longer shared rules to stop escalation. Global trade is collapsing not because the world failed, but because power is being reasserted. And when power replaces systems, history shows what follows, not immediately, not everywhere at once, but inevitably.